Today I want to talk about a kind of forest that doesn't just live near water, it lives in the tension between land and sea. Mangrove forests are coastal forests that thrive where most trees can't. Salty, shifting, muddy shorelines, where the tide goes in and out like a slow heartbeat. Mangroves aren't evenly spread across the planet. They cluster in warm coastal regions across dozens of countries and territories. In 2020, global mangrove coverage was estimated at about 137,760 square kilometres across 118 territories and countries, and almost 3/4 of the world's mangroves are found in just 15 countries. Regionally, the distribution looks roughly like this. Asia holds around 42%, Africa around 21%, North and Central America around 15%. Australia and the islands of Oceania around 12% and South America around 11%. Since 1996, roughly 3.5% of mangrove forests have been completely lost. Over a longer window, the story is more dramatic. In the last 50 years, especially before 2000, development and pollution contributed to a 35% reduction in mangrove acreage. Between 1996 and 2020, global mangrove coverage declined by roughly 3.4%, with about 40% of that loss linked to coastal development. Some research suggests that even now, about 1 to 2% of mangrove forests may be disappearing each year. At the same time, there is evidence that the rate of decline has stabilised somewhat, with gains appearing around some major rivers, estuaries and deltas. But satellite maps can't always show ecosystem health, and even where area looks stable, biodiversity and forest condition can still be declining. Mangroves are among the most threatened habitats in the world, and 1 out of every 5 mangrove ecosystems is considered endangered, threatened, or vulnerable. Protection has expanded in recent years. Since 2012, protected mangrove area has increased by about 70%, and around 42% of the world's mangroves are now under some form of protection. But protection on paper doesn't always mean protection in practice. Losses are not evenly distributed, and in parts of Asia, mangrove losses have been close to double the global average annual loss. The Bay of Bengal region hosts the largest mangrove forest on Earth, around 39,000 square miles, spanning around 1 million hectares across India and Bangladesh. The Sundarbans is a globally significant biodiversity zone and a protective barrier for millions of people living in cyclone-prone coastal regions, but large portions of habitat in the broader region have been lost to intensive agriculture, and even with protected status, mangrove and fish species have continued to diminish. In Myanmar, mangrove loss rates have been described as 3 to 5 times higher than the global average. Indonesia, an archipelago of roughly 17,000 islands, holds about 1/5 of the world's mangroves. But over past decades, its mangrove area has been heavily reduced, with estimates suggesting a drop from about 4.2 million hectares in 1982 to around 2 million by 2000. And many remaining areas are described as critically damaged. In places like eastern Kalimantan, pressures have included palm oil expansion and shrimp farming, with estimates of loss in the early 2000s ranging from about 9,000 to 25,000 hectares per year in some periods. In parts of Thailand and Mexico, mangrove losses have been linked to shrimp pens. In some cases, the aftermath can leave water conditions too toxic for ecosystems to recover easily, making regrowth much harder without remediation. Even so, mangrove loss is not inevitable, and restoration and protection efforts can work when they're well designed and enforced. Globally, there are hundreds of protected areas containing mangroves across many countries and territories. Restoration is not as simple as planting trees, but with protection and the right conditions, mangroves can recover naturally. Many projects focus on restoring sediment flows, stabilizing shorelines, and supporting young trees during vulnerable stages. One method for distributing mangrove propagules at scale uses drones, which can cover large areas quickly. Another approach uses semi-permeable barriers designed to trap mud and sediment, increasing survival rates for newly established mangroves from about 20% to over 70% in some projects. Some large restoration missions have planted hundreds of thousands of trees using experimental methods that combine planting with nutrient support. Community-led projects can be especially durable, including conservation areas that support ecotourism, sustainable harvesting, and local livelihoods alongside habitat recovery. National policy can make a measurable difference. Some countries have slowed or reduced mangrove loss through regulation and enforcement. And certain places, long-term protection has limited losses to only a few percent over multiple decades. Internationally, major organisations and alliances support mangrove conservation through mapping, funding, research, and global targets. There are global efforts to halt loss, expand restoration, and increase protected habitat by 2030. The next decade is widely seen as critical for ecosystem restoration and ocean protection, with initiatives aiming to protect coastal habitats and restore degraded ecosystems at scale. Mangroves are fragile, but they grow in places humans also want, along flat coasts and sheltered waters. The future of mangroves won't be decided only by planting trees, but by how we plan and protect coastlines as living systems rather than empty real estate. Mangrove protection is climate adaptation, biodiversity protection, and economic resilience bundled into one ecosystem. And unlike many climate solutions that require new inventions, mangroves are already here, already working. They just need space. Thanks for watching.